Welcome to the Short Funk Podcast. I'm Tom Barbalet, and today a question from a listener, Brad Klingerman. I'm not sure if I've had any major interactions with Brad, but he's certainly an avid Short Funk listener, and Brad, this question is for you. He wants to know whether the idea of us, i.e. you the listener and me the schmuck talking, were monkeys in a simulation preceded or emerged from the act of building Noble Ape. I've always been relatively nihilistic. I think when I was about 7, I sat my parents down and asked them categorically how we could be sure that we weren't just brains in vats, or like the primacy, basically, of one of us and the remainder of us actually not really existing. And the only response my parents came up with was my father said, had I started watching religious programming on television, which I think was his response to that kind of question. I came from a relatively curious, somewhat nihilistic, very intellectually driven family, and in part, that influenced a lot of my early kind of survival nihilism. The environment that I grew up in Australia was, in one sense, quite idyllic, and in another sense, quite brutal. And it was a fair measure of both of them. I've got another Short Funk recording that I'm going to be doing this evening associated with things about places that I've lived, and I've got a little bit associated with Australia to talk about. But yes, prior to developing Noble Ape, I was already incredibly not in the normal view of things. And there were periods of time where I had to, adopt institutional belief systems, particularly when I was in university, but also I had a lot of survival experiences through that period of time and leading up to that period of time. And Field of Chaos here, I keep talking about this book, Field of Chaos, which is available through a variety of secondhand booksellers and also on Amazon, and also electronically. And there are a variety of ways that you can get Field of Chaos. But Field of Chaos should illustrate that Barbalet prior to Noble Ape was pretty nihilistic and pretty of the perspective that we were either part of some strange simulation environment, or we would never have any degree of primacy associated with, the nature of things in the world. And if we accepted that we were part of a simulation, we could at least begin to explain some of the things that existed or some of the things that we saw. I certainly thought of society and the indoctrination of society and social norms and these kind of things as being very well-defined and simulatable properties. In fact, one of the reasons that I started Noble Ape was that I thought it would be relatively easy to actually create coherent societies with simulation rules. And here, simulation rules are not true-false. Simulation rules here are continuums, they're fluctuating things. It's really basically, for someone who just wants a high-level view, it's like fuzzy logic. The rules here are not yes, no rules. The rules here are summations of parts and these kind of things. So yes, prior to Noble Ape, I was pretty well of the view that these things that I saw, reality, society, these kind of elements were all simulatable properties. And really, coming to Noble Ape from that, Noble Ape was just a logical consequence of all these views that are kind of percolated in me up until this point. So, in that light, yes, the idea of monkey in a simulation predates Noble Ape. In fact, the term Noble Ape predates Noble Ape. I used the term in 1995 to describe, an existence to aspire to, actually. I was living on campus at the time, and the Campus magazine or something asked me how I saw myself because I was writing antiviral software. I was writing computer software prior to Noble Ape. And I said I thought of myself as just a noble ape. And, to this day, I still continuously refer to myself as an ape. I just think of that, maybe not a noble ape, but at least an ape. And I think that explains a lot of stuff that really this higher intellectual nonsense can't really explain. Like, fundamentally, just large ape-like creature, and underneath that large ape-like creature, there's semblances of intelligence and virtue and things like that. But really just a monkey in a simulation. Tom Barbalet in San Jose, signing out.